everyone. I usually record myself, or I usually post videos of myself performing poetry, but I always wanted to record myself doing readings of my writings because there are so many poems that I don't get a chance to perform, and I have so many writings besides my poetry that I wish my audience to hear. This is something that I plan to do on a regular basis, and to start it off, I'm reading an article that I wrote last year called The Existence of God. This article is part of a series that I wrote called The Nature of God. And here goes. In this article, I'm going to try to answer two questions that bewilder people regarding God. Now, before I go any further, I must say that I am no means claiming that I know everything. I'm just going to try to answer these questions to the best of my knowledge. And I'm not writing this as a philosopher or as a scholar of theology. I'm just writing this as a Christian who hopes that those who read this article will understand why I believe in God. I'm writing this so that those who do not believe in God will understand why I do. But this does not mean that I'm seeking approval to believe in God. I'm also writing this for fellow believers who might have been asked the question why they believe in God. And it is my hope that after listening or reading to this article, they'll be better equipped to answer that question. The first question that I'm going to look at is, does God exist or not? That is a very common question, but it can prove to be very difficult to answer. I must say this though. Inasmuch as we say, or inasmuch as it is claimed that there is no evidence that God exists, there's also no evidence that he does not. And that is the basis of agnosticism. I'm not an agnostic, but I'm saying this because atheists usually look at Christians and ridicule them because, or rather say ridicule us because of our faith. But they fail to realize that we both live by faith. I can even argue that atheists possess more faith than Christians. The reason why I say this is because, for me, I find it easier to believe that there was a mastermind in the making of the universe than to say that everything came to be by chance. Since atheists are more vocal than Christians, they make it seem as if they have proof that God does not exist. They don't believe in God just because they've never seen him, not because they've proven that he doesn't exist. But let's look at how atheists explain the origin of the universe. I'm not a physicist, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. But I find the Big Bang theory very problematic. And to me, it raises more questions than the answers it seeks to provide. This is because the Big Bang does not explain the origin of matter. Because it says the universe as we know it started as a small singularity. Then my question is, where did that singularity come from? It didn't come from nowhere. My high school physics tells me that you cannot get something out of nothing, which is known as the theory of thermodynamics. So to me, the Big Bang theory fails to explain the origin of the universe because it does not explain originality. The second question that I'm going to try to answer in this article is, where did God come from? To be honest, I would say these questions are much easier to tackle when talking to people face to face rather than in writing. But nevertheless, I'm going to try my best. First of all, the question, where did God come from, is wrong. I say this because the question itself does not really understand the nature of the Christian God. Because this question assumes that God came from somewhere, which will raise the question, so who created wherever God came from? And then we have the same problem as our atheist friends, who cannot explain or who cannot explain the origins of everything. The Bible clearly tells that God created everything. So to say where did God come from will mean that something existed before God did, which is improbable. Usually the picture people get when they think of creation or when they think of God before he started creating earth or the universe, they picture a God who was hanging around in space in the dark. But that's where people get it wrong. There was no space. There was no darkness. Because God created those two. There was not even time. So to say where did God come from is displaying the failure to understand that God created everything from space, darkness, time, existence itself. Thus it couldn't have come from anywhere. Now, so where was God before he started the creation process? Where was he before he started creating the universe and earth? This is my belief. I believe God himself was the planet that he was living in. There was not light source like the sun, the moon, because he had not created it yet. He was living in his own planet. He was not in space. This may sound too complex or even too ridiculous, but let me give you an example. The movie Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. In this movie, there's a villain known as Ego the Planet. He is a planet, but he himself also lives in his own planet. I may find it very difficult to explain it, so I recommend to watch the movie if you really want to understand what I'm talking about. But I say this to say that the question, where does God come from, shows the failure to understand the nature of a Christian God. Because it is impossible for something to have existed before God, because God is existence himself. And this is where I'll stop this article. I hope you enjoyed and you understood it. I tried to summarize it as much as I can. And as I said before, it is easier to tackle some of these questions when talking to people face to face than putting them in writing, because there are some things that I may find hard to explain. But if you have any questions, just put it in the comments or just shoot me a text. Thank you.